you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. We were just pouring money into Ukraine. It was a very unfair situation. So we made a deal and it'll be signed very soon.
The US is mediating a peace deal for Ukraine, but they won't do it for free. They have named a new price for peace. Washington wants control of all of Ukraine's critical resources. They've sent a new draft deal to Kyiv. Top Ukrainian officials and international media have seen it, and they say it goes far beyond the previous agreement. Here's what the United States has demanded: complete control of Ukraine's natural resources, oil, gas, minerals, everything. The Americans want it. Now, this is far more aggressive than the original minerals deal. In the old deal, profits were supposed to be shared, but now the US wants all major energy assets of Ukraine, plus it wants to keep all the money generated from them. So obviously, senior Ukrainian officials have raised an alarm. They say this deal threatens their sovereignty, that their profits would be routed abroad, making Ukraine even more dependent on the US. Because along with this deal, America wants a veto power to decide which foreign investments can be made in Ukraine. Let me repeat that for you. The US wants to decide and veto foreign investments in Ukraine, including any proposals from Europe. This is one of the clauses in the new draft. It is called the right of first offer. And here's what it means. If there is a different deal on the table for Ukraine's natural resources, America can effectively kill it. It wants exclusive access. And this is in line with Trump's position on Europe. He often complains about Europe's role in the war. He says they're not doing enough and that the US has been shortchanged.
Europe is in for a very small fraction of what we're in for. It affects them much more than it affects us. Again, they are in as a loan, which nobody knew until I came along. Europe is giving the money to Ukraine as a loan. We were just pouring money into Ukraine. It was a very unfair situation. So we made a deal on rare earths.
Perhaps that is why the US president wants to not leave anything out. He also wants all revenues from Ukraine's mineral wealth. There is one more clause in the draft pact about a new reconstruction fund. Again, the US wants to control it. Profits from Ukrainian projects will go into this reconstruction fund, but Kyiv will not be able to use this money, at least not immediately. First, the Americans will be paid. They will recover the cost of their weapons and aid to Ukraine. Only then, only when they have got all their money, can Ukraine access the fund. Now, these are very strong terms. Will Ukraine agree to them? Will it sign this deal? Zelensky has not said yes or no. He says they're still negotiating. The US is constantly pushing for more changes. But I guess after the showdown at the White House, Zelensky is being more cautious, choosing his words carefully and saying that he wants to cooperate with the United States.
The conditions are constantly changing. I thought that we have agreed that there will be a framework deal and then the full deal. Now, as I understand, the Ukrainian and American teams are working on it, because the US is changing these conditions and offers to sign the full deal right away. I wouldn't want the US to have impression that Ukraine is against the minerals deal in general. We have shown our positive signals. We are for cooperations with the US.
And what does Ukraine get in return? It may end up surrendering all its mineral wealth with no guarantee of peace or even American protection. The US has refused to secure Ukraine. It is giving zero security guarantees in return. Meanwhile, negotiations for a peace deal remain stalled. A few days back, the US negotiated a ceasefire in the Black Sea. The talks happened in Saudi Arabia. The Americans mediated between Ukraine and Russia and then declared that they had an agreement. But Russia has rejected that deal. President Putin, in fact, is raising the stakes. He says Zelensky should step aside. Putin wants Ukraine under temporary international administration. He wants a transitory government in Kyiv, one that paves the way for new elections in Ukraine and a new government in Ukraine that Moscow finds legitimate. Only then will the real peace talks begin. These are the words of Russian President Putin.
In principle, of course, it would be possible, under the auspices of the UN, with the United States, even with European countries, and of course with our partners and friends, to discuss the possibility of introducing temporary administration in Ukraine. For what? In order to hold democratic elections, in order to bring to power a viable government that enjoys the people's trust, and then begin negotiations with it on a peace treaty, sign legitimate documents that will be recognized throughout the world and will be reliable and stable.
Those are the terms of Putin. The US is still negotiating, but there's no real breakthrough. Meanwhile, on the ground, the fighting continues. Where does this leave Ukraine? Firmly on the back foot and with no good options. Every day there is a new demand, a new proposal and a new deal to discuss. And each new proposal is worse than the one before, demanding more and more from Kyiv, more resources, more control, and even political power. So the prospects for Ukraine are narrowing. The US wants economic control and Russia wants political dominance. And these two are discussing Kyiv's future, often with Kyiv not even in the room. The only thing that looks increasingly certain now is this: Kyiv will have to make some serious concessions for peace, either its mineral wealth or its political sovereignty, or maybe even both. It will have to pay a hefty price for peace.
Greeting you with aloha and namaste.
I love India.
Presence, occupation of a territory by another country pertains to India, what we saw in Kashmir.
How do you see Trump's America?
Yes, the current administration behaves differently from the previous administration.
Are you saying that there are foreign powers who are trying to bring down the current government in Syria?
Exactly.
Bluntly, Iran, maybe Russia too.
Prime Minister Modi committed to South-South, cooperation.
Not over 50%.
Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.